good morning, everyone. Again, so glad to have you here and glad you enjoyed the music. Those original pieces by Mike Karloff. He actually just composed them this Wednesday night when I asked him for some music, and he did us 3 pieces of music, and they're truly, truly lovely, and I'm so grateful. So everyone, hello everyone, and welcome. I am David Old, and I am the senior minister at Unity Spiritual Center of Windsor. Unity Spiritual Center of Windsor is part of the international unity movement, and which is sometimes described as a positive, practical, progressive approach to Christianity. We do follow the teachings of Jesus the Christ. And from its beginning, Unity has honored the universal principles in all religions. And the founders of the Unity movement, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, they actually attended the first Parliament of World Religions that was held in Chicago in 1893. And you know, in November 2018, I was really excited to be able to be a part of a large group of Unity leaders that joined over 10,000 religious scholars, interfaith teachers, spiritual luminaries, New Thought leaders, and Nobel laureates from more than 200 religions and 80 nations to attend and participate in the 2018 Parliament of World Religions, which in 2018 was held in Toronto. So last week, I began a talk series on Adyashanti's book, Falling into Grace, Insights on the End of Suffering. Adyashanti, or Adya as his followers call him, is one of my favorite contemporary spiritual teachers and leaders and writers. He was trained in the Zen tradition. You know, I became acquainted with Adya and his works in 2004 when I first found one of his talks online. And then I purchased and read his first book, Emptiness Dancing. You know, I found his writings and talks to be so clear, so insightful, and so profound that I've purchased and read all of his books with the exception of just one. And I've read all of them at least 2 or 3 times, something that I actually seldom do. You know, this series of talks will continue for the next 2 months. And so I highly recommend that you purchase and read Falling into Grace so you can follow along as we go through this series. In his introduction to his book, Adya says the aspect of spiritual life that is the most profound is the element of grace. Grace is something that comes to us when we somehow find ourselves completely available, when we become open-hearted and open-minded and are willing to entertain the possibility that we may not know what we think we know. In this gap of not knowing, in the suspension of conclusion, a whole other element of life and reality can rush in, he says. This is what he calls grace. It's the moment of aha, a moment of recognition, when we realize something that previously we could never quite imagine. Last week, we explored different experiences and circumstances that can open us up to grace. As Adya noted, somehow difficult occasions have a way of opening our hearts and our minds the most. Actually, it is in moments of great challenge, like the one most of us are facing right now, which can offer the greatest opportunities for spiritual growth and the transformation of consciousness. You know, I find it somewhat prophetic and in divine order that the year before last, Unity Spiritual Center of Windsor changed its vision and mission statements. We changed our vision to a world powerfully transformed through the growing movement of shared spiritual awakening. And our mission we changed to, we inspire and empower spiritual growth to awaken us and transform the world. So let's affirm and claim that growth and transformation of consciousness for each of us right now. So our vision, will you repeat after me? A world powerfully transformed through the growing movement of shared spiritual awakening. And our mission, we inspire and empower spiritual growth to awaken us and transform the world. So today, my title of my talk is Unveiling Our Suffering, which is the title of chapter 2 of Adya's book. So as we begin this exploration of Adya's teachings during this series of talks over the next few months, we will find that his teachings are simple ways to open ourselves to grace, to look at things from a different perspective, to look at ourselves through a different lens. And you will be invited throughout this series to go deeper and deeper into the truth of who you are. And to be honest, you may find it quite challenging. You know, a good quote that I had last week is worth repeating. And this quote is from Sunyu Suzuki, who wrote Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And I quoted this last week, and it's so appropriate for today as well. Suzuki says, if your mind is empty, it is always ready for anything. It is open to everything. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. But in the expert's mind, there are few. So, as human beings, we are compelled to reflect on our lives. And one of the questions that comes up over and over is, why do we suffer? Why do we suffer? You know, suffering is one of the most common components to being human. And many have tried to explain and understand suffering. And as Adya points out, all of our world religions are unique methods to address human suffering and the sense that so many feel of being alienated and cut off in some way. So many of us feel separate from one another, which further breeds a sense of fear and isolation. So there's always been this deep, abiding question of why do we suffer? And Adya points out, he says, we're actually wired not to suffer. Just notice when we feel in conflict, when we feel anxiety, our bodies tense up. Our breathing, heart rate, it actually changes. And the body responds directly with this anxiety and tension and suffering. What it's telling us is something just isn't right. So we have that. Our body is speaking to us. At the same time, Adya says that we are hardwired for happiness. When we feel happy, our bodies, they operate at their optimum. We feel good. We tend to be healthier and more energetic. You know, everything about our being seems to be hooked up to be happy, to be loving, to be open, and to be at peace. Adya says, we look to everything to make us happy, not realizing that happiness is actually at our very core. It's natural to our being. There's no way to become happy. We simply need to stop doing the things that make us unhappy. So let's explore more deeply this notion of suffering and why we suffer and whether there is a way of getting out of suffering. Adya points out that when we begin to look at the cause of suffering, it reveals itself to be very simple. You know, often we think the source of our suffering lies outside of ourselves. We suffer because someone in our family said a very hurtful thing to us, and it actually hurt our heart. We're unhappy because, well, it's raining outside, and we really wanted to work in the garden. So many times we're always trying to find what is out there that is making us to suffer. But there is a place within us from which suffering arises. And August says it's our sense of self that suffers. It's our sense of self that feels strain, anxiety, alienation, and loneliness. It's also the same self that feels happiness and love and joy and peace as well. So I just ask us, what is it about this self that makes it so prone to suffering? Well, we feel separate. We feel different from others. And you know, this process of feeling separate, of feeling different from others, begins at birth. We are programmed from the moment we are born and told how to think. Our parents tell us how to think. Our society tells us how to think. They give us a name. We're given an age. We're given a gender. The school, religion, politics, we're all are taught these things. We learn things in school. We learn things in church. We learn things with our friends as we talk to them, as we grow up. It's almost like a computer program that is ongoing. And Anya tells us that suffering originates with the creation of a you and a me. As Anya says, there's something about the perception of being a self, a someone, a something different and independent from everything else that gives rise to suffering. You know, as we grow older, we develop this sense of self that we call ego, which Adya describes in its most generic sense as our sense of who we are. Something is separate and other from the world around us. Initially, it's really not a problem. I mean, it actually seems to be necessary. But there's a shadow side to this sense of self. And Adya says that when we see life as other, existence itself as other, when we see each other as other, then these others are seen as potential threats, which breeds fear, and which in turn breeds conflict and suffering. So we develop this concept of me that needs to be protected and taken care of, that my needs and wants come first, irrespective of what someone else wants or what somebody else needs. Adya says so one of the first deep insights that can come to you is that all suffering is based on a misperception of self. As soon as we conclude that we exist as a separate self, then we've opened a doorway to suffering. So Adya isn't saying that we need to get rid of our sense of self. It seems to be necessary. Adya says it's biologically hardwired into our system. But Adya points out that the older we get, the more solid and separate of our sense of self becomes. And the more we feel like it needs to be protected, that it needs to get its way. And the more separate we feel from the world and others, the more we want to control our environment and control others so that we can make sure that we get what we want. All of the great spiritual teachings direct us to look within. Know thyself. Adya says that unless we know ourselves, we can never find our way beyond suffering. In fact, it's because we don't know ourselves that we're so prone to suffering, that we're so prone to misunderstanding the nature of who we are and the nature of reality itself. For Adya, the ego is nothing more than a state of consciousness. He says, when our mind starts to imagine that we are something separate and different from the world around us, it changes the way we perceive, which means it changes our state of consciousness. The thoughts that we believe alter and change our state of consciousness. Now, this is in total alignment with our basic unity principle number 3, which states we create our life experiences through our way of thinking. The truth of the matter is that when we shift our consciousness at any time by just changing the thoughts that we hold in our mind, we shift our consciousness. So let's do a little experiment. So what I'm going to ask you to do is just relax for just a little bit here. Relax and sort of bring yourself into a meditative state. And I want you to take these thoughts that I give you and take them to mind, take them into your mind. So right now, imagine you are at the beach. You've gone to the beach. What a wonderful, it's a beautiful day, and we're going to the beach, and we get to the beach, and oh, we can hear the water lap against the shore. We can smell that unique blend of water and sand. And it feels so warm, and we decide to just lie down in our bathing suits on the sand. Not even use a towel. We just lie upon that warm, warm sand, and we feel it all against our back and down our legs. And it is so comforting, so relaxing. And as we sit there, we feel the sun upon our face. We feel our face getting warmer and warmer, and we begin to perspire. And we hear the seagulls out flying around. We hear their call. Now, you know, even though we weren't at the beach, even though we're not at the beach, we were able to feel that. We were able to imagine that. I mean, if you're like me, I was able to feel the sun on my face. I could feel the sand on my back. But it's just your imagination. The thoughts you choose in mind can change the way you feel. And as Adya points out, how you feel affects how you perceive yourself and others and the world around you. You know, one of our, like I said, one of our main teachings, one of our principles is that we create our experiences through the quality of our thinking. That's our unity basic number 3. Unity is a very positive thinking group. I mean, we teach that because our thoughts do affect how we feel and how we react to everybody. So our thoughts have power. And we know that thoughts in mind produce after their kind. So also our first unity principle is that there is only one presence and one power in the universe and in our lives. You know, we're not a bunch of separate human beings having a spiritual experience. We are one divine spiritual being. Divine mind, source, God, or whatever you want to call it. And that one is having infinite, individual human experiences in and through and as each of us. Adya says, to find liberation, we must wake up from this dream that our mind creates, that we're something separate from everything around us. This is the only way we can begin to find a way out of suffering, he says. This is the only way that we can begin to find a way out of suffering. And in actuality, he says, the ego is a fiction. It's really nothing more than a story in our mind. We have written, directed, and acted out this story. And when our story ends, the main actor of our story, our ego, ends as well. We have a tendency to put off thinking about it, but at the end of every ego story, the ego dies. And the good news is that we are not egos. Adya offers a short exercise that will illustrate what I'm saying. So let's take a few minutes, and this won't take long, to do the same thing. Get in a meditative state. And just for a short moment, probably just 5 seconds or so, I want you not to think of anything. Clear your mind. Don't think about yourself. Don't think about others. Don't think about this day. Okay, so clear your mind. And I'm going to give you 5 seconds to just keep your mind clear. So what is it that actually happened in those 5 seconds? What happened? Adya says maybe you think that the only thing that you experienced was a quiet mind. But if you begin to really examine what happens when you're not thinking about yourself, you might see that you are no longer separate anymore. You aren't other anymore. In these moments, you will notice that the whole past disappears. Now, this might be frightening for some, to see that when you're not thinking about your past, that it's literally not there. You know, it's quite obvious that the past no longer exists. You know, whether it was a minute ago, a day ago, or a month ago, it's gone. As Adya makes perfectly clear, when you stop thinking, all there is now. He's also saying that when you're not thinking yourself into existence, there really isn't a self. Just think again about the exercise we just did. In 5 seconds of no thought, what happens to your name, your gender? What happens to the person you imagine yourself to be? In Buddhism, and after all, Adya is Zen trained, we find the doctrine of non-self, also called anatta or anatman, that there is no unchanging permanent self, soul, or essence in phenomena. Now, in unity, when we speak and write of a self, we speak of it and write it in 2 different ways. Self with a small s, which is our ego, and which is not the truth of who we are. And then the self with a capital S, which is our Christ consciousness. The divine, true, eternal, spiritual self that we all are. Adya tells us that if we're to find a way beyond suffering, we're going to have to look at this sense of self that's really nothing but a collection of memories projected into the present moment and then into the future. We're going to have to begin to notice that when we think we are, is just that, simply a thought. What we imagine ourselves to be is just that, imagination. Neither our thoughts or our imagination can tell us who we truly are. And my friends, we are so much more than we could ever dream that we are. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and invite you to join in a meditation with me. I'm going to invite you to relax, let go of any thoughts that you might have about what you're doing later or what you did earlier, and just bring your attention to this place and this time. So as we begin to bring this message to a close, we're going to do it in a meditative way. Adya tells us that it's quite astonishing to open completely to the idea that you're not what you think you are, that you are not the story of you in your mind. This is revolutionary if you really begin to see it for yourself. It begins to call into question the very essence of who and what we are. And by looking at yourself in this way, by looking at how your mind creates your sense and image of self, you begin to feel some distance from your mind. Adya then asks a series of questions that I want us to contemplate while we're in this meditative state. So again, just relax. We find ourselves fully present to this time and this place. And we listen to these questions and we allow ourselves to contemplate them during this meditation. And we'll do it slowly. So the first question is, what is it that's noticing your thoughts about yourself? What is it that is noting your thoughts about yourself? What is it that's seeing the mind, that recognize the mind? What is it that is seeing the mind, that is recognizing the mind? What is it that notices all of the ideas that you have about yourself? What is it that notices all of the ideas that you have about yourself? What is it that looks at the self-image? What is it that looks at the self-image? What is it that feels this sense of being a separate self? What is it that feels this sense of being a separate self? Adya says that by living these questions, with questions like these, space opens within your mind. And you begin to realize that maybe you're not really your mind. That maybe your mind is just something that happens within you. That thoughts are something that just occur on their own without the next step of then implying that there is a thinker who is thinking them. The question then becomes, what is it that these thoughts are occurring within? What is it that these thoughts are occurring within? And who or what is aware of all of this? So I invite you to just, for a little bit, let's just rest here in the silence, just for a little bit, as we allow these questions to sink deeply in our heart. My friend, you are so, so much more than any thought that you will ever have. So let's just rest just for a moment in the silence. So loving Holy Spirit, we are so grateful for this time that we have right now. This time that while we are not here physically, spiritually, we are together as we always are. And we are completely, totally grateful. And so it is. Amen. So everyone, thank you again for coming and being with me today. And I do have a few announcements, and we will have an actual closing prayer, and we'll be doing our prayer of protection at the end. But first of all, again, thank you for being here. And second of all, thank you, all of you, who have been so generous in your donations and in your love offerings. There are several ways that you can donate, and we certainly appreciate it from the bottom of our hearts. You can donate with the button on our website. At the very top of our website, you can hit that button and it'll take you to Canada Helps, where you can do a secure donation either with a credit card or a debit card. We're also doing e-transfer with our Unity Center Windsor at gmail.com email address. We also have, I think, PayPal. If it's not quite ready yet, it will be. And also, you may mail in a check to our chapel on Wells Road in Windsor. And you can find that address in our website. And also, just wanted you to know that all of our talks are being posted within the week on our Unity Windsor YouTube channel, on our Unity Spiritual Center of Windsor website, and also on Facebook. So, if any of you out there are just joining us for the first time and you'd like to be on our email list, you can also either call us or you can email us. And again, all of that information is on our Unity Spiritual Center of Windsor website. And we will be glad to add you to our email list newsletter that comes out every week. And then again, this morning at noon, I will be doing conversations with Reverend David, our Zoom at noon. And again, you can find that meeting number and everything on our website. So at noon, we get together and we discuss the day's talk. And we look at it in more depth. And we can have some really good conversations. And we would love to have you here. So, let's take this moment right now to go ahead and just bring our attention again to this place and time, and let's just feel this marvelous sense of gratitude. Meister Eckhart said a long time ago, he said that if the only prayer you ever said was thank you, that would be sufficient. So we are grateful for all the rich blessings in our life, grateful for Unity Spiritual Center, for those of us who make that our spiritual home. We are grateful for each other. We are grateful for the truth of who we are. And so let us say right now, for all of those of you who have turned in love offerings and tithes, we want to bless that. And so divine love in me and through me blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. So everyone, thank you again so much, and let us go ahead and end with our prayer of protection. The light of God surrounds us. I am light. The love of God enfolds us. I am love. The presence of God watches over us. I am present. Wherever I am, God is, and I am divine. Thank you, everyone. Bless you. Thank you for coming, and God bless. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. Love you. Bye-bye.